So picture this. Millions of people, and hey, maybe some of you listening right now, waking up hours before the sun even hints at rising.
Yeah, pitch black outside.
Pitch black. You eat a quick meal, drink some water, and then for the next 16, maybe 18 hours, you completely refuse all food and drink.
And often in the sweltering, unforgiving heat of summer, depending on the year.
Exactly. You endure the headaches, the fatigue, the profound physical depletion. And you don't just do it for a day.
Right. It's 30 days straight.
30 days straight every single year.
Yeah, it is a staggering, almost superhuman display of collective discipline.
It really is. But here is the paradox we are starting with today, and honestly, it's a paradox that should bother you.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you look at the societies performing these monumental feats of endurance, what do you actually see? Far too often, you see societies that are, well, politically fractured.
Economically weak.
Yeah, economically weak, completely lacking in basic socioeconomic justice, and just fundamentally unequal. So the question we are asking today is, why?
Why does this incredible human endurance yield absolutely zero civilizational progress?
Right. Which is the ultimate diagnostic failure, isn't it?
It is. I mean, if you view a society as a patient, and you view these rituals, the fasting, the prayers, as the prescribed medicine, you are forced to look at the clinical results.
You have to look at the chart.
Exactly. If the patient is taking the medicine perfectly, enduring the bitter taste, following the strict schedule down to the exact minute, but the fever keeps rising and the organs are shutting down.
And something is horribly wrong.
Right. You have to conclude that either the medicine is wrong or your understanding of the diagnosis is fundamentally flawed.
And that brings us to the core of our deep dive today. We are pulling from a massive, really groundbreaking lecture by the rationalist scholar Allama G.A. Parwez.
Specifically, his deep textual analysis of Surah Al-Imran from the Quran, verses 64 to 70.
Yeah, and let me tell you, if you were listening to this on your commute or, I don't know, prepping for a meeting, prepare to have your perspective entirely shattered.
Because our mission today is to dismantle a massive, centuries-old misconception about what this text actually is.
Right. It is a misconception that has basically entirely neutralized the power of the original message.
It has.
For centuries, humanity, and specifically the Muslim world, has treated this text as a religious placeholder.
Like a collection of magical incantations.
Exactly. You recite the verses in a specific melodic tone to get personal blessings, or maybe you listen to it to feel a sense of emotional comfort before you go to sleep.
Which completely strips the text of its teeth. Parwez's entire thesis here is that what we're looking at in this source material is not a manual for personal emotional soothing.
It's not a self-help book.
No, not at all. It is a civilizational blueprint. It is a constitutional document designed to construct a highly functional, equitable, and just socioeconomic system.
But to see that, you have to realize that humanity has fallen headfirst into what he essentially describes as the ritual trap.
The ritual trap.
Okay, I want to stay on this for a second because I know our listeners are probably thinking, wait, what's wrong with rituals? How does a civilizational blueprint devolve into a trap?
Well, the trap is mistaking the packaging for the product. We obsess over the minor mechanics, you know?
Like what?
Like the exact physical postures, the precise pronunciation of syllables, the exact minute the sun sets, while completely ignoring the socio-economic justice, the human liberty, and the systemic independence that this blueprint actually demands we establish.
So the ritual becomes a substitute for actual societal change.
Exactly.
Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. How did we get there? I mean, how did we get from a constitutional document meant to build a fair, functioning economy to a society that literally argues over the precise distance between a person's feet while they stand in prayer?
Because that is a massive leap backward.
Always a leap.
To understand that devolution, we have to look at the linguistics. The vocabulary of the text was systematically hijacked over centuries.
The linguistic keys were swapped out.
Right, turning a systemic roadmap into a religious cage. And that brings us to the most critical paradigm shift in Parwez's entire lecture.
The difference between two Arabic terms, deen and mazhab.
Yes.
Now, if you grew up hearing these words, or if you just drop them into Google Translate right now, it's going to tell you they both mean religion or faith. But the sources we reviewed tear that assumption entirely to shreds.
Completely. In the rationalist framework, translating deen as mazhab isn't just a minor translation error. It is the original catastrophic mistake that derailed the entire system.
Wow.
They are not synonyms. They are virtually opposites in their practical real-world application.
I want to dive into the military analogy used in the text to explain this, but I really want to make it visceral. Let's imagine an actual battlefield.
Okay, let's do it.
In the concept of deen, which translates as a system of life, the entire military operation is focused on one ultimate objective. You are in the trenches, the mud is up your knees, artillery's going off.
Every single action you take, every drill you practiced in boot camp is designed for one thing: to hit the actual target and win the war.
Exactly. And in this context, the war is the establishment of systemic justice. It's building a society where no human being is economically or politically subjugated by another. That is deen.
Right. In a system of deen, the drills and the discipline are merely the means to an end. They are the training.
Right.
The relationship between the individual and the central authority is highly coordinated, yes, but it is entirely results-oriented. If you do all the drills but you lose the territory, you fail.
But then we look at mazhab, organized religion, and the battlefield analogy shifts in the most absurd way.
It does.
In mazhab, the ultimate objective, the actual enemy, the goal of socio-economic justice is completely forgotten.
Yeah.
So what happens? The soldier's still standing in the mud.
But instead of fighting the enemy, the soldier becomes obsessed with secondary details.
Right. They are arguing with the guy next to them about the thread count of their uniform. They are meticulously shining their combat boots, while the enemy is actively breaching the perimeter wire.
They are executing flawless parade ground maneuvers, shouting the cadence at the perfect pitch, but they have completely forgotten there is an actual war to be fought.
Well, it's wild.
What Parwez calls the obsession with juziyat or furu'at, the minor details and branches. And what's truly fascinating from a psychological perspective is why we do this. Why do we retreat into mazhab?
I would guess because fighting an actual war is terrifying and difficult.
Precisely. Mazhab provides immense psychological comfort. When you abandon the difficult, dangerous, and often politically risky work of changing a corrupt society, which is what deen demands, you replace it with ritual.
Because rituals are safe.
Exactly. They don't threaten the political elite. They don't threaten the economic monopolies. They provide what the text calls emotional self-deception.
Oh, that hits hard. If you're listening to this on your commute, think about your own workplace. How often do you see mazhab in the corporate world?
Oh, all the time.
Right, the obsession with corporate rituals.
Yeah.
Filling out endless TPS reports, arguing over dress codes, or, I don't know, the font on a presentation.
Well, the actual mission of the company completely fails.
Yeah, and revenue tanks. But it feels like you're doing something important. I formatted the spreadsheet perfectly. I must be a great employee.
It's the exact same psychological mechanism. You fast for 18 hours in the heat. You endure the physical hardship, and you feel a profound sense of personal piety. You feel your soul has been cleansed.
Right.
But Parwez's lecture demands we connect this to the bigger picture. The text asks the uncomfortable question: what did that hardship produce in the real world? Did your fasting feed the hungry in your neighborhood?
Did it dismantle the economic monopoly, strangling the working class?
Did it stop human subjugation?
And if the answer is no?
If the answer is no, then according to the civilizational blueprint, your action yielded zero systemic value. It was merely mazhab, yielding only emotional self-deception. You shined your boots while the base was overrun.
This shifts the entire evaluation metric. I mean, you aren't graded on how hard you prayed, you're graded on whether your society is just.
Exactly.
And this leads right into another massive redefinition in the text. Because if we are redefining religion as a system, we also have to redefine the things that destroy that system.
Wow.
Which brings us to the word polytheism, or in Arabic, shirk.
A word that carries immense historical and theological baggage.
Right. Because when I hear shirk, I immediately picture like an ancient museum exhibit.
Right. People bowing down to stone statues of jackals.
Exactly. Or worshiping gods of thunder and harvest.
Yeah.
It feels like a primitive theological error that modern people just don't make anymore.
Which is how traditional clerics often frame it. They keep the definitions safely locked in the past or restricted to literal idol worship. But this lecture yanks the concept of shirk right into the modern sociological and political landscape. In this socio-political context, shirk is not about stone statues at all.
So what is it?
It is an active, ongoing societal crime. It is the crime of sectarianism.
Okay, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here because I struggle with that leap. How does dividing into sects like Sunni, Shia, Catholic, Protestant equate to worshiping multiple gods? Worshipping a golden calf is one thing, but following a different school of historical thought seems totally different.
To understand the connection, you have to look at the mechanics of authority and sovereignty. If the goal of the deen is a unified social order governed by a single divine constitution, which in this context is the Quran, then there can only be one ultimate legislative authority.
Okay.
So when a community fractures into sub-factions, what is actually happening structurally?
Well, they start following different rule books.
Precisely. Each sect elevates a different human authority. It could be an ancient imam, a medieval scholar, or a modern cleric. They treat these human interpretations, their fatwas, their specific historical accounts, as the ultimate law, equal to or sometimes even overriding the original constitution.
I'll see.
They have created multiple centers of legislative power.
So they've taken the singular authority, the divine constitution, and shattered it.
Exactly. And that, in the systemic vocabulary of the Quran, is shirk. It is ideological polytheism. You have placed a human being on the legislative throne next to the divine.
Wow. So by saying, I am a follower of this specific historical scholar, and his rulings are my absolute law, you are systemically committing polytheism.
Yes.
Because you are granting a human being the divine right to make laws.
That is exactly what the lecture argues. The text explicitly equates the creation of these religious sects with high treason against the constitutional framework of the deen.
Because it breaks the unified community, which shatters the social order.
You cannot have one nation with 5 different competing supreme courts, each claiming absolute divine authority. The society will rip itself apart.
Which brings up the counter-concept in the text. If shirk is wandering off into these sectarian side paths, pledging allegiance to different human leaders, what is the alternative? The text uses the word Hanif.
Yes. And the lecture provides a very vivid, almost visceral definition of a Hanif. It says to be a Hanif is to walk entirely straight toward the ultimate objective, quote, like the line of a nose.
Like the line of a nose. I love that imagery. It implies total forward-facing focus.
You refuse to be distracted. You don't look left toward one sect's historical grievances or right toward another sect's specialized rituals. You don't get bogged down in century-old debates about who should have been the leader 1,000 years ago.
Right.
You keep your eyes locked entirely on the core objective, establishing a just society in the present. A Hanif rejects all man-made religious labels.
And adhere exclusively to the singular identity mandated by the blueprint, which is simply Muslim. No hyphenations. Just one unified identity.
Exactly.
And here is where the lecture absolutely blew my mind, because Parwez highlights a brilliant piece of logic the Quran uses to prove how absurd these hyphenated sectarian identities actually are. This is the historical retrofitting mentioned in verses 65 to 67.
Oh, it's one of the most intellectually rigorous arguments in the text.
Okay, listeners, follow this logic. The Quran is addressing the people of its time, and they are aggressively arguing over the prophet Abraham. The Jewish factions are claiming Abraham was a Jew.
And the Christian factions are countering, no, Abraham was a Christian.
And the Quran basically stops them and asks them to use their basic chronological intellect. It says, why are you arguing about Abraham being a Jew or a Christian when the Torah and the Gospel, the very books that define the rules for those labels, were revealed centuries after he lived?
It exposes the logical absurdity of retroactive tribalism. You cannot apply a label to someone who existed long before the label, and the theological framework for that label was even invented.
It's like arguing whether Julius Caesar was a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
Or whether Aristotle preferred Mac or PC. The categories simply did not exist. But here's the genius part. Parwez takes this exact same Quranic logic and he points it directly at the modern Muslim world.
It's a devastatingly effective application. If it is logically absurd to call Abraham a Jew or a Christian because those factions didn't exist in his time, Parwez asks the obvious modern equivalent.
Which is?
Why do modern Muslims divide themselves into sects like Sunni, Shia, Deobandi, or Barelvi?
Because none of those existed during the time of the Prophet Muhammad.
Exactly. The Prophet wasn't a Sunni or a Shia or a Hanafi. Those labels, those specific schools of jurisprudence and theology, were invented centuries after his death. To claim his legacy while adopting a label he never knew, never authorized, and never practiced is the exact same historical retrofitting the Quran condemns regarding Abraham.
That makes perfect sense.
The text challenges believers to use their intellect. The phrase is, afala takalun, will you not use your reason to dismantle these man-made labels and return to the original unhyphenated source?
Okay, this sounds amazing in theory. The logic is flawless. But practically, I mean, if sectarianism is literally polytheism and all these labels are historically absurd, How do you even get these warring factions in the same room?
It's difficult.
We have a deeply fractured society with centuries of bad blood. How do we put the pieces back together?
That is the ultimate diplomatic hurdle, and it brings us to the constitutional premise of the text, found in verse 64. This is the concept of kalimatun sawa, or the common factor.
Common factor. Let's really unpack this, because it sounds like a UN resolution. The verse calls for humanity, specifically opposing factions, to come to a word that is equitable, a common agreement. But what exactly is that agreement? Because I'll tell you right now, you aren't going to get everyone to agree on everything.
And the text doesn't ask them to. According to Parwez, kalimatun sawa is not a compromise where everyone waters down their beliefs to meet in the middle. It's a laser focus on one specific foundational baseline. The common factor is the shared belief in God's exclusive sovereignty and the absolute refusal to associate human authorities, clerics, kings, or parliaments operating outside the divine values with him.
So, no human gets to rule over another human. That's the baseline.
That is the baseline.
But I'm looking at my notes here, and I have to push back.
Sure.
How does agreeing on that one baseline actually unite people who have massive, deep-seated theological disagreements? You can't just ignore those disagreements, can you?
Actually, the brilliance of the system is that it demands you must ignore them for the sake of the state. By saying, we only unite on this one constitutional premise, you actively force the community to park all the divisive, speculative, theological debates at the door.
Give me an example of the kind of debates we're filtering out here. Because people have literally gone to war over these.
Oh, the lecture gives great examples. Debates like, is Jesus currently alive in heaven, or did he die a natural physical death? Is the text of the Quran created in time, or is it eternal and uncreated?
Right.
Who should have been the first caliph 1,000 years ago?
People who've shed blood over whether the Quran was created or eternal.
They have. But what Parwez points out is that these debates are entirely speculative. They are arguments about the unseen or about historical dogmas that we simply cannot change. And more importantly, from a systemic perspective, they are deliberate distractions.
Distractions from what?
Engaging in endless sectarian polemics about theology distracts the public from the actual, tangible mission establishing a functional social order today.
It's the ritual trap, mutating into the debate trap. You can argue for 1,000 years about whether Jesus is physically alive in heaven, and at the end of that 1,000 years, your society still has rampant poverty, systemic corruption, and political subjugation.
Exactly.
The common factor says, stop. Park those debates. They do not matter to the constitutional framework. Do we agree that humans shouldn't enslave humans? Yes. Then let's build the system on that. You can debate theology in your living room, but it has no place in the Constitution.
Precisely. And the strategic brilliance of anchoring societal dialogue only on the common factor is that it strips power away from the clerics. Religious hierarchies across all faiths really maintain their power by emphasizing the differences.
Didn't need the conflict.
They thrive on the secondary theological nuances that only they are supposedly educated enough to interpret. By throwing all of that out and focusing solely on the common factor, you dismantle the mechanism of control that relies on division.
And we should point out that this mechanism of control often relies not just on what you believe, but on who you are, who your parents are, what tribe you belong to. But the blueprint attacks that too, right? In verse 68, the text completely strips away what we might call the accident of birth.
Yes, the biological lineage argument. This is a crucial pivot in the text, from tribalism to ideological alignment.
Explain that, because the historical context here is wild.
Oh.
The Israelites of the time were basically claiming we are the chosen people, we have a monopoly on truth because we are biologically descended from the prophet Abraham.
Yeah.
And you see this today. You have people who feel spiritually superior simply because they were born into a specific family, or a specific religious sect, or a specific caste.
The lecture notes that this biological claim carries absolutely zero weight in the Quranic system. In fact, relying on biological ties for societal status is relegated to an animalistic level of existence.
Animalistic. That's strong.
Think about it. In the animal kingdom, lineage is everything. A lion is a lion because its parents were lions. It requires no conscious thought. But in a conscious, rational human society, ideological alignment must completely supersede biology.
Meritocracy over nepotism.
Exactly. The text explicitly states that the true inheritors of Abraham, the true beneficiaries of this system, are exclusively those who consciously choose to follow his revolutionary roadmap. It's about practical submission to the divine constitution. Ideological alignment is the only metric of merit.
So you aren't born into this system.
No, you choose to enter it by aligning your actions with its constitutional values. It completely democratizes human worth.
Okay, this is a massive foundational shift. We've established the linguistic change, moving from religion to a socioeconomic system. We've established the constitutional framework uniting purely on the common factor, ignoring speculative theology and rejecting human authority based on lineage.
Right.
But now, I want to get into the engine room.
The economics.
Yes, because if this is a civilizational blueprint, how does it actually govern resources, wealth, and the day-to-day economy? I mean, you can't just have a philosophy, you need a mechanism.
This is where we transition into the concept of nizam-i-rubiyat, the system of providence. And to understand the mechanics of this economic engine, we have to look closely at another key term from verse 64.
Which is?
The command not to take one another as lords, or arbab.
Arbab, lords. Now, when I hear lord, I think of feudal Europe. A guy in a stone castle with an army.
Taking all your wheat and taxing your chickens.
Right. So I kept asking myself while reading these sources, how exactly does a human become a lord over another in a modern complex economy? If no one is physically forcing me to bow to them, how does this mechanism actually work today?
It's a vital question, and Parwez uses a profound historical anecdote to clarify this mechanism perfectly. It involves a conversation between the Prophet Muhammad and a new convert who was previously a highly educated Jewish scholar named Adi bin Hatim.
Okay, set the scene for us.
The convert hears a verse of the Quran that says the people of the book took their scholars and monks as lords besides God. And he pushes back. He says, wait a minute, we didn't worship our scholars. We didn't bow down to them or pray to them.
Because again, people associate lord with an idol you physically worship.
Exactly. But the prophet replies with a brilliant diagnostic question. He asks, did your scholars not declare things permissible, halal, and forbidden, haram, on their own authority? And did you not follow their declarations? The convert agrees that yes, they did exactly that. And the prophet replies, that is how you worship them.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me pause there. That completely redefines worship. It's not about physical bowing. It's about legislative authority.
Yes. In Parwez's economic explanation, granting human beings, whether they are clerics, priests, or even secular parliaments operating outside the constitutional values, the authority to issue decrees that declare things permissible or forbidden is the ultimate act of human subjugation.
I want to use an analogy from the text to make this concrete because this really helped me understand the difference between necessary administration and actual tyranny. Parwez talks about a local government temporarily banning a certain fruit, let's say melons, during a severe cholera outbreak.
Right, a basic public health measure.
As citizens, we accept that ban. We don't eat melons for 3 weeks. Why? Because we recognize the state's administrative authority to manage temporary crises for public safety. And this is the crucial distinction the text makes, we only accept it because it is a temporary administrative measure based on situational necessity. It's not a permanent religious or moral decree.
Now, let's connect this to the bigger picture of natural resources in the economy. A fundamental premise of the Quranic system is that the universe's resources are inherently free for human use. They are a divine gift meant to nourish everyone.
Okay.
When a human cleric, or an unconstrained political authority, is given the power to permanently declare natural resources, foods, or economic actions unlawful outside the explicit, very limited boundaries of the divine text, they are usurping a power that belongs only to God.
They are essentially saying, I own this aspect of reality, and I am restricting your access to it based on my personal authority.
Precisely. If a human has the power to restrict your natural liberty without a divine constitutional mandate, they are economically enslaving you. They become your rab, your lord. Stripping away the power of clerics or human institutions to arbitrarily declare things haram or halal is, therefore, the ultimate act of economic liberty. It frees the economy and the individual from the whims of human dictators.
Okay, but let me push back again. If we strip away all human authority to restrict resources, and we just say no human rules over another, human nature tells me that someone is still going to try to hoard all the grain or monopolize the water supply. You can't just have total anarchy and expect wealth to distribute itself equitably. There has to be some structure, right?
Absolutely. The absence of human dictatorship does not mean the absence of order. That is where the markaz, or the central authority, comes in.
Talk to me about the mechanics of this markaz. Because my immediate fear is, doesn't a central authority just become a new lord? How does it function without violating the rule we just established?
It functions safely because the markaz is not an individual ruling by personal whim. It is an operational framework strictly bound by the divine constitution. Think of it less like a king and more like an automated administrative operating system. The system requires a markaz to ensure that the nizam al-rububiyat, the system of providence, actually reaches everyone.
What does that mean practically?
It means the central authority's job is not to invent new laws of permissible and forbidden. Its entire purpose is to manage the equitable distribution of resources. The text mentions Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's original vision for the state of Pakistan, which Parwez argues aligned with this Quranic framework.
Oh, interesting.
His vision was a state where the Quran is the absolute authority and the government is merely the administrative arm implementing its socio-economic justice.
So the Markaz is like the logistics department for the Constitution. It ensures that no single individual can hoard resources to the point where they subjugate another person through poverty.
Exactly. In this system, wealth is not meant to circulate only among the rich. The Markaz ensures the flow of resources to guarantee the basic necessities of life: food, shelter, education, healthcare for every single citizen, regardless of their background. That is the engine of the civilizational blueprint.
Okay, so we have this magnificent blueprint. It promises human freedom, economic justice, universal unity. But we look around the world, and we clearly aren't living in that utopia. What happens when a society looks at this blueprint and says, nah, we're good. This sounds like a lot of hard work. We'll just stick to our sectarian arguments and our ritual fasting, thanks. What are the actual consequences?
That brings us to what Parwez brilliantly terms the social physics of the system, specifically the law of requital.
The law of requital. I'm not going to lie, that sounds ominous. It sounds like a thunderbolt is going to come out of the sky and smite the wicked. But the lecture is very careful to strip the mythology out of this, isn't it?
It is entirely unmythological. If we are to abandon the mythological view of religion, the mazhab, we must also abandon the mythological view of divine punishment. The law of requital isn't about an angry God throwing arbitrary lightning bolts because someone prayed with their hands in the wrong position. It is a scientific, unavoidable consequence of social conduct.
Let's go back to the medical analogy to explain how this social physics works.
Perfect. Imagine our patient from earlier. They have a severe, life-threatening infection.
Okay.
The doctor prescribes a highly specific, powerful antibiotic. Now, the patient takes the pill exactly on time. They check the label meticulously. They make sure they drink exactly 8 ounces of room temperature water with it. They face the right direction when they swallow it.
So they perform the ritual of taking the medicine with flawless precision.
Exactly.
But the fever keeps rising. The infection spreads to the bloodstream.
In that scenario, the laws of biology don't care about the patient's flawless ritual. They don't care how sincerely the patient swallowed the pill. If the medicine itself was fake or if the diagnosis was fundamentally flawed, the result, the rising fever and ultimate death, proves the failure of the intervention. The consequence is biological, not a punishment for lack of sincerity.
And Parwez applies this directly to the macro level of social conduct and governance.
Yes. A system of deen is proven valid entirely by its real-world socio-economic outcomes. The text insists on absolute, results-oriented governance.
So it's all about the data.
Exactly. If a society performs endless religious rituals, if they build massive, opulent mosques, if millions are fasting flawlessly, if they perform the pilgrimage perfectly, but that same society remains deeply impoverished, technologically backward, politically subjugated by foreign powers, and violently divided into warring sects,
Then they're failing the test of the blueprint.
the fever is still rising. And the law of requital dictates that such a society will inevitably face collapse and global humiliation. Not because God is angry at a specific ritual mistake, but because they have violated the systemic laws of social survival. If you don't build a just economy, your society will fracture and fall. It is social physics.
And the text makes a really intense point about what happens when you witness this failure. It says that denying the system, despite witnessing its tangible results or lack thereof, is deliberate rejection. It uses the word kufr.
Yes. Kufr is often translated simply as disbelief, but in this rationalist context, it means active, deliberate concealment or rejection of the truth.
It's an action, not just a thought.
Right. If you see that your purely ritualistic approach is resulting in total societal decay, and you still refuse to pivot back to the constitutional blueprint of the deen if you cling to your mazhab, because it's comfortable you are actively choosing failure, you are witnessing the absolute truth of the law of requital, the mathematical collapse of your society, and you are choosing to ignore it.
Which is a perfect segue to a really fascinating tension in the text, found in verses 69 and 70. And it's about this concept of mudahanat.
Compromise.
Right. Now, I have to step in here and challenge this, because this feels counterintuitive to how we are taught the world works. In the modern world, especially in Western democracies, compromise is basically treated as the ultimate political virtue, right? You give a little, I give a little, we reach a consensus, we shake hands. Bipartisanship. It's how societies function without tearing each other apart. But this text warns incredibly fiercely against mudahanat. Why is compromise suddenly a fatal flaw?
To understand why the blueprint rejects it, we have to distinguish between administrative negotiation and constitutional truth. The text introduces the concept of haq, which translates to absolute truth.
Okay, define absolute truth in this context.
The Quranic constitution relies on what Parwez calls eternal values, musakila qadrain. These are fundamental realities that do not change based on human opinion. You can think of them like the laws of physics or mathematics.
Like 2 + 2 = 4.
I think we can use a stronger analogy to really capture the danger here. Let's think about structural engineering.
Okay, I'm with you.
Imagine you are building a massive 100-story skyscraper. The structural engineers calculate exactly how much steel and concrete is needed to support the building against the forces of gravity and wind. These are absolute mathematical laws of physics. Now imagine a group of politicians and developers come in. They want to save money on the 15th floor. They say, let's compromise on gravity. Let's use half the steel required just for this one floor. It's a bipartisan consensus. We all agreed.
The building is going to collapse.
Exactly. The laws of physics do not care about your political consensus. You cannot negotiate with gravity. And in the Quranic system, you cannot negotiate with the mustakila qadrain, the eternal values. You cannot compromise on the mathematical reality of human freedom. You cannot say, well, we agree that no human should subjugate another, but let's compromise and let this one specific elite class of clerics dictate our economic laws just to keep the peace.
Because if you do, the socio-economic structure of the society will eventually collapse.
Precisely. Mudahanat, this dangerous form of ideological compromise, means intentionally greasing the floor.
Greasing the floor. Unpack that metaphor.
The text uses this brilliant, subtle imagery. Sectarian and religious forces, or vested political and economic interests, constantly attempt to put grease on the floor of these absolute constitutional principles. They don't ask you to abandon the Constitution entirely. That would cause a revolt.
Right. They just want to create a little bit of ideological slippage.
Exactly. They say, just bend this one rule about resource distribution. Just allow this one historical tradition to override the Quran, just for now, to appease the masses.
They want you to slip away from the absolute truth inch by inch.
And the text proves, historically and logically, that allowing even a microscopic compromise on these foundational truths leads to systemic corruption. Once you grease the floor, you cannot stop the sliding. It leads to profound self-deception. You believe you're still standing on the solid ground of the deen while you are actually sliding smoothly into tyranny and mazhab. Ultimately, it leads to the total collapse of the society. The divine system permits absolutely zero compromise on its foundational truths, because the physics of societal survival depend on them.
So we cannot vote away the principle that humans are born free. We cannot compromise on the fact that no cleric, no parliament, and no king can declare things haram that God made halal. We cannot compromise on the equitable distribution of resources. These are the gravity of the Quranic blueprint.
They have the mustakila qadrain, the unchangeable, eternal values that protect human liberty from human tyranny.
This has been an absolutely incredible paradigm shift. I mean, we started this hour by looking at a text that most of the world treats as a repetitive chant, a soothing religious placeholder, to recite during a month of fasting. And by diving into Parwez's rationalist analysis, we've uncovered a rigorous, demanding, and mathematically precise civilizational blueprint.
It is a blueprint that challenges the very foundations of how almost all modern societies operate today, both secular and religious.
So let's synthesize the permanent value we've extracted from all these sources. What is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, as you go back to your day? We've learned that this civilizational blueprint demands 3 absolute non-negotiable things. First, the absolute human freedom from the economic and legislative subjugation of other humans. Second, universal unity built strictly on a common factor, demanding the total eradication of divisive, historically absurd sectarian labels. And third, the uncompromising legislative sovereignty of the divine over any form of human or clerical tyranny.
It is ultimately a call to wake up, to move from the passive, emotionally comforting self-deception of mazhab to the active, challenging, results-driven reality of being.
And that brings us to our final thought. We've seen how taking human beings as lawmakers strips away our inherent liberty. We know exactly how sectarianism shatters our society. We know we have to return to that common factor and refuse to grease the floor or compromise on the physics of human freedom. But here is the question I want you to really mull over, to wrestle with, before our next deep dive. Imagine we succeed. Imagine we wake up tomorrow and successfully strip away all these centuries of sectarian labels: Sunni, Shia, Hanafi, all of them. And imagine we completely revoke the clerical and political authority to arbitrarily declare things halal or haram. What exactly does the day-to-day operation of that newly liberated markaz, that central authority, actually look like in the middle of a modern, hyper-complex, digitized global economy? If there are no lords, how do we govern the free without the system collapsing into anarchy, and without the administrators secretly becoming the new lords?
That is the ultimate operational challenge of the Deen, and it is exactly what we must explore next.
Something to think about. Until next time, keep questioning the rituals and keep diving deep.